Right, it's 5:30 and we're going to start the Community Police Review Board, January 15th, 2025. Okay, I'm going to say this once again about you're supposed to push the button in order to speak, and I know it doesn't always work out very well, but we'll try that. And Simi has the screen that shows the hierarchy of who did it first. So we'll ask her to give that to us. Will the clerk call the roll?
Member Beasley Day, Member Bryant, Member Byrd, Member Christensen, Member Demrell,
Here.
Member Grant, Member Smith, Member Solorio,
Here.
Chairman Hahn.
Here.
Chairman Hahn, Board Member Grant is absent this evening. We would like to ask the board to consider his request for an excused absence, which meets our criteria for granting of an excused absence. At this time, we ask for a motion from the board to grant him an excused absence.
Second.
All right.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Anybody have any declaration of conflict of interest on the items on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll go on. Now we'll go to public comment, comment in person. And then, so if anybody would like to speak, just come up to the dais. You have 3 minutes. Okay, not seeing any. We'll move on to the next item. The consent calendar, we have minutes from the December 18th meeting. Like if you've reviewed them and are okay with them, need a motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Man, this is going great. It's the best meeting I've had so far. Okay, we're now in new business. Yes.
That we move item A to the bottom, move item B and C up one notch so that when we elect the new chair, they can deal with the items B and C as the new chairperson.
Okay.
4A pass 4C or?
Correct. 4A would become 4C and
For,
B and C up a notch.
okay.
Is that a motion?
That was
That's
a
a
motion.
motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so then we're going to take item B as the first item, the use of force study update. I don't think doesn't sound like your mic is on.
The light's on. Oh, there we go. Maybe I just need to get a little closer. There we go. Perfect. Well, good evening. And tonight I'm here to talk about MPD use of force data. And specifically, I know there was interest from the CPRB about disparities in force used against our Black community members. So I'm going to provide some of that information tonight and just talk in general about use of force data, disparities, type of use of forces that we use, and you'll see kind of the breakdown that we'll use. I believe you have that PowerPoint there in front of you as well. So a couple things is background that I felt it was important for the CPRB and the public to understand is that the use of force, my belief and our department's stance is that the use of force data is rightfully of interest to the public. And that knowing that it's a serious issue when anytime our officers use force, and also understanding that it has a lot of public interest, we do take these use of force incidents very seriously. And we review every single use of force that happens within the Modesto Police Department. And not only do we review every use of force, we review every use of force at three different levels. So a first line supervisor, a sergeant reviews that use of force and provides a recommendation up the chain of command. A lieutenant then reviews that use of force and either can disagree, agree, add issues, whatever it may be. And then finally it sits with the captain where the captain does the same thing. And ultimately we make a final finding whether that use of force was within policy, not within policy, if there's training issues, things like that. So that is something that not every agency does, but and I think you'd be hard pressed to find another agency that scrutinizes use of forces as much as the Modesto Police Department. But one thing I want to say, and you'll see in the data, that disparities do exist. And that is something that is why why we're here, part of why we're having this conversation. And it's something that is not just a unique to Modesto, but it's really a nationwide challenge that we join many in trying to investigate the reasons behind and look at data and try to come up with be solution oriented. So I want to make sure that is understood as well. And then really that the use of force disparities, as I'll talk about as we go through some of the data that I'm going to show you, are very complex. And we take these disparities seriously. We're not going to just say it is what it is. But at the same time, I think hopefully when at least perspective from me is that there's no one solution that's going to solve for this problem and no one organization that's going to fix this issue. This has been an issue ongoing ever since policing has been in existence. And I think it's something that for decades and decades, we've continued to try to answer this question and try to solve for solutions. And I do at the end, I do have some comments on that. Just some more background. Again, I think it's stuff that we've talked about before, but I think it's important when we talk in the context of police officers and when they use force. It is outlined in the California Penal Code 835A, which outlines the legal framework for when any peace officer may use objectively reasonable force, including deadly force. And then also, this includes when we think about force and the reasons they use it is to effect an arrest, prevent escape, and overcome resistance. And those, the penal code outlines a lot of what officers, and it outlines what reasonableness is. But again, just as laws are written, it doesn't cover every circumstance and is always up for debate of what the intent and meaning and what's objective and things like that. For the past 5 years, the Modesto Police Department has averaged 206.8 use of force incidents per year. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And in the 2024, the use of forces accounted for, when we look at, and you can, again, data, right? You can look at data from different perspectives, but 0.09% of all calls for service that come into the Modesto Police Department, and 0.80% of all arrests and citations. So to put this another way, and this isn't discounting anything, but 99% of all calls for service were handled with no use of force needed by the Modesto Police Department or occurring. So data. One of the things that we looked at was the last 5 years, 2020 through 2024. Again, I asked Lieutenant Kleiber to provide this data at the end of 2024, understanding that some of our use of forces are still going to reviews. So these numbers are pretty darn close, but they could be subject to change as a few of the incidents are still going through the review process and making sure that we're accounting for everything that's in the current systems. But when you look at this, so this is an aggregate, this is a compilation of the total numbers, and we look at all the use of forces through those 5 years. You look at use of force against white individuals is 34% of those use of forces were against white individuals, 42% were against Hispanic individuals, 17%, and these numbers round up or down depending on where the point is. But 17% of use of forces were against Black people, and Asian was 4%, other is 2%, and unknown is 1%. So I think what we look at, or what's important to look at here is, when you look at these numbers, so the total when we look at numbers is 347 were white individuals, 433 were Hispanic, 175 were Black individuals, 37 Asian individuals, 26 others, and 6 unknown. And so I want to be able to provide those percentages because what the next few slides I'm going to show you is I want to take just 1 year of data, 2024, and I want to go through and show you the different ways that we've broken down the use of forces and to show you how complex this data can be and how we could potentially analyze it. So you'll probably hear me say this a lot tonight, but I don't subscribe to the notion that we can provide simple answers for a very complex issue. So going through the data, and this is broken up onto 2 slides, but I wanted to take you through some of the things. And again, there's even a lot more columns that we could break down this use of force data. And in your questions at the end, you may have some of those questions or thoughts. But when you look at 2024 use of force data, you can see the total number of individuals that force was used against next to the ethnicity column, so total number. The next column is the total percent. So when you look at the total percent of use of forces that the municipal department used, that is the total percent of that ethnicity in the use of forces. We also wanted to look a little bit at residents versus non-residents. And so when we looked at the data, we looked at where they provided their address and to determine whether they're a resident of the city or not. So you can see the number of residents, and then you can also see the percent of residents that force was used against. And that first column that says resident percentage, that's the percent of use of force in that ethnicity that were residents, if you're following me there. The next column over is the percent of all. So if you compare the people that were residents compared to all uses of force, then that is the percentage makeup of that. And then we did the same with non-residents as well. And then we also broke it down into dispatch call for service. So when force was used on these individuals, was it a dispatch call for service where the police were called to that type of incident where force ended up being used? Or was it, and you'll see the next slide, or was it what we call on-view activity or self-initiated activity? So did the police officer make a bike stop, a traffic stop, some type of self-initiated or on-view activity by the police officer? And so you can see the numbers and the percentages associated with that. Again, it breaks down the percentage number and then compared to all uses of force as another piece of data when we look at information. Moving on along, again, what I talked about, we looked at on view. So again, the number of on view incidents where force was used, that percentage compared to all uses of the force. And then very small amount, but what we call pre-planned missions. So if we have one of our special units, our SWAT team, serving some type of search warrant or things like that, we consider that what we call a pre-planned mission. So they're going to somewhere to serve typically a search warrant or something like that, where force was used. And then again, the percentages along with that. And then what we did in addition to that, when we looked at each ethnicity, we looked at what type of, we categorized in several different categories, what type of force was used against the individual. And so you can see bodily force or a takedown, or sorry, we want a controlling force. So that's where somebody had to grab somebody, by their arm and do a wrist lock or something like that. You have the bodily force or a takedown. That's usually taking someone to the ground or a step up from just a mere controlling force. Impact weapon or a body strike, canine, pepper ball, and beanbag, taser, and firearm. And so this data, as you can see, we can spend hours talking about even probably one of these categories, but it is information and it should draw our curiosity to ask questions and talk about why, especially when you look at percentages. And let me go back. If you look at total uses of force and the total percent by ethnicity, and again, I think, news articles that have come out and some of the concerns that were expressed here is you look at our black population at 16.3% of the use of forces in 2024 were used against our black population. And so we'll continue to go on, but I think we'll talk about some of that stuff. So some of the current activities that we're involved in, and one of the things that since this conversation has been going on for months, things that we've considered and we've talked about. So as I've mentioned here before, we've even talked with academics who do this for a living to say, you know, what could we get out of a study and pay somebody and some academics to come in and do a study. Now, these studies are typically 12 to 18 months or longer, cost a significant amount of money. And what could that data come back and tell us? And so we kind of threw that around a little bit, and I've talked to some of you guys about that. We've looked at, I've been in, as I'll talk about, talked to a lot of different community groups and individuals to try to assess what locally, which is my biggest interest, what locally do we think we should do? And then also looking at training and what we can do to provide training to make sure when we talk about implicit bias and we talk about other things like that, that our officers are their decision making is because of whatever situation in front of them and not determined by ethnicity and things like that, or gender or sex. And so those are things that we continue to look at and try to adjust and try to look at these things. Building community relationships. I will harp on this all day long, is that our community relationships are key, as you'll see in the key takeaway slide on the next slide, in my belief, to helping resolve this situation. So things that we're doing is implemented a few years ago, the cultural relations class. And I know we've talked about that here, and I can't overemphasize the impact of that class, because it gives the opportunity for our police officers to interact with our community members, and often these are our minority community members, to have real conversations, to have conversations about each other's perspectives, so that when our officers go out on the street, they understand someone else's perspective about, and a minority community member's perspective about what it feels like to be stopped by the police or contacted by the police. And at the same time, our community members get to understand what an officer feels when they're going on a call for service, so they're making a traffic stop and things like that. Project Resolve, that's something that some of you guys are involved in, that we've been having meetings, again, for a few years, which we have community members and stakeholder representatives, as well as law enforcement throughout the entire county, going to these meetings to talk about issues such as what we're talking about today. Community dialogues. There's just, even recently, I met, I know Board Member Grant is not here, but I met with Board Member Grant and several African-American community members on a Saturday to talk about this data. And I showed them the use of force data and inquired to them. And we had, and it was a lot of our younger community members to ask what they thought we could do and things that we can work on. And then we have our traditional programming with examples that include the Save Me a Seat program, where our officers go to lunchtime at different high schools and eat lunch with the kids to try to build those relationships. The 10K with the cop program. We have a school engagement officer, Detective Dodge, that's in our middle schools. Our annual youth summit, which is something that we've been doing for 5 or 6 years now. And the Clergy Council was the one that actually first suggested this. And then we've taken it over, where we bring approximately 100 high school kids over to the police academy off of Crow's Landing Road. And we do a day of force option simulator training, and then usually have a key speaker and talk and interact with these kids. And it's an amazing event. And so much more. But relationships with our community, so that we can build trust and not distrust, are things that we're going to continue to focus on as a police department. And I think that the key points that I want to emphasize is that data is absolutely important, and that we should 100% be curious of it and ask questions. You know, again, there was just newspaper articles written a few days ago, and again, the easy conclusion is to draw the conclusion that there's racism in policing. And again, while I will not stand up here in front and tell you that there's not bias involved, and those are things that we continue to work out to root out, because again, has been stated here a million times, everybody has biases, but making sure that we're not using biases to affect the way that we do our work, and recognizing implicit bias and things like that is something that we're committed to making sure that we do, so we can have the most effective and fair policing police department possible. So data is absolutely important, but I sometimes don't like the conclusions that some news organizations jump to. So I already mentioned it, but there's no one strategy or organization that's going to solve it. And that's why I think it's important upon all of us as a police department, as the CPRB, as our community, to learn and to be a learning organizations. It's in our statement of our department of what we are. We are a learning organization, and we're not going to be 100% perfect. And we're not going to know everything, but we're going to commit to learning data, commit to continuing to improving as a police department. And we want to be part of a learning community. I think our community, lived here long enough, that I believe that our community also wants to be a community that grows and really is more of a trendsetter than a follower. And I think that's something that I'm proud of, and why I live here and why I raised my family here is because I'm proud of the community we live in. And I think it's something that we want to do together. And then I want to leave you, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, but I want to leave you just with a couple thoughts about how do we solve this issue. And again, where there's no issue, I think community relationships, in my opinion, are a key part of this. And I think that when you look at the history of policing in the United States, and you look at the distrust that has developed, especially amongst some groups, especially our minority groups, that this distrust has grown. And so when you think about it, and you think about the contact that police officers have, especially with minority groups who may have a ton of distrust for the police department, you can just imagine, at least I can, about how that interaction may go. When you have somebody who doesn't believe the police department is going to treat them fairly, they could be more apt to not go along with the program, to think that rights are going to be violated, and at the same time, now that becomes an adversarial reaction with the police department, and the police department police officer, ends up reacting into some type of use of force. And the same thing with implicit bias. That's things that we have to look for. But I think that the relationship between and building those strong relationships, as we have cultural relations classes, as we have use of force simulator training, as we have groups like I did, where I sat down with minority community members a few weeks ago, when we get to know each other and we get to build those relationships, I think some of those fears go away and then lead to better outcomes and better interactions versus an adversarial relationship. And it's a tough thing, because a city of especially 220,000 people, to try to build those relationships with every individual is tough. But I think it's something that we have to promote as a CPRB, as a city, as a police department. And I think that we can improve on those. And then you have just a lot of things that they're somewhat out of, as we sit here today, some of our really control or our direct influence, but I think is important. When you look at the relationship between socioeconomic status and the likelihood of police contact, crime, where people live, mistrust, I think all of those factors have a big play in when we look at racial disparities and policing in the United States. So we need to continue to provide high quality and relevant training for our police officers. We need to talk about principled policing. We need to talk about integrity, making sure that we're treating everybody fairly. One thing I've told you before, when I talk about everybody I hire, I talk about how I expect they're going to treat every member of the public how they would want a member of their family to be treated. And I think if we use that golden rule, we'll be a lot better off as even a police department. And so that's my expectation. And we'll continue to modify our training with suggestions from the public, with best practices that we learn throughout our industry, to make sure that we keep improving, to make sure that we do whatever we can to make sure that racial disparities do not exist in the policing that we do here in the city of Modesto. So in conclusion, I think and I kind of already said it, but every conversation I have, when we talk about disparity in uses of force or arrests or name it in policing, the conversation without question, at least the conversations I'm involved in, and I've been involved in a lot, continue to come back to relationship building, opportunities, especially when we talk about our youth, and making sure that we're providing positive opportunities and outlets and things like that And that's where the conversation goes every single time. And without question, that's where it went last time when I just recently met with a group of young African-American people. So, let me see if I have any points to make. I think when I look at I guess I'll preemptively, in case this might be something on your mind, because I know, article came out and a little bit off topic, but related. RIPA data article came out, I think yesterday in the Modesto Bee. And again, these are articles that are written that are just written. And even though they reached out to us for comment, it takes time for us to look at data and things like that too. We don't always work on their timeline, but something I want to look at when you look at 2022 data. One of the things, remember, RIPA was newer. We're using an application. That application that we were using at the time was having all kinds of issues in submitting the data. And so that I actually sent a letter at that time after we transitioned to a new program explaining that our low numbers were due to system related issues. And so again, when you just see an article that talks about a triple increase in traffic stops, it's all, again, data is important, but data is not always what meets the eye. And I think that when you look at the difference in that, I can tell you from the RIPA data that there's an inaccuracy there in what was reported versus what we did because of a software system that we have since transitioned away from and getting that data to be entered into the RIPA system. So I just wanted to make that comment because I think that's relevant when we talk about data and we talk about the way that we can perceive data, we can report data, and we can interpret data. I think it's extremely important. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Press your button. So we can, that one right there. See it?
Your light screen down.
Go ahead.
I was looking at this and it looks like so it's the annual report, right? And it's a whole year's data. Is there any way to get either monthly or quarterly data to see if there's trends that may, like, is this holiday stress? There's a lot more events between Thanksgiving and New Year's, or there's summer boredom. Just to see like if there's a pattern where sometimes parts of the year are worse than others, or is it roughly 12, 10, 14 all year long throughout every month? The other thing I was thinking of, and the reason I said that is because we typically get, if there's lethal force, we learn about it immediately, or virtually immediately. But if there's just general use of force, just different things that outlined in here, we don't hear about it but once a year. I was just kind of curious if we could look into that. Or I don't know how this data is collected, but the other thing I was curious about, is there are there age groups, both in those who are being, the force is being used on, and age group of the officers using the force? Because is there a bias, generational issues, like a young rookie or a second, third year? Do they have different levels of use of force than, say, a veteran of 14, 15 years? Just based on their experience, they've learned how to handle their aggression differently, or their confrontations, and decelerate those confrontations. And relative to the person who is receiving the force, is there age groups? Because if there's parts of our community that need to be taught earlier, like a youth, like under 20, or then we should be engaging earlier. If it's someone like you met this 3 weeks ago, and their fathers and mothers, and they're already in their parents, and they're finally engaging you. I mean, there's two different people with different bias, and different levels of bias or evolution of their adulthood.
Sure.
And so I'm just kind of curious if that's too far into the weeds, or does it enlighten us on where the problems might lie?
Yeah, so very good questions. And this is, I think, a good example of there's never ending amount of data that we can provide it. And I say that this data is absolutely stuff that we could provide. But just like the data I've shown up there, and I think that we could do it. Lieutenant Clyber is usually the guy that's tasked with doing this. So that's the guy I usually look at when I look at, what's the time consuming piece to get all of this data. So as the rest of the CPRB gives any input or the public gives input, I definitely take a look at what's in our, within our capabilities to do in a timely manner. But I think that that's data that we can. I think it's important, and I'm not opposed to getting that data. But I think oftentimes, without looking at each individual use of force and why it occurred, was it because the officer was terse with somebody and didn't de-escalate the situation enough? Was it because the person that force ended up being used on was fearful of the police, and that was why? I mean, there's really, you got to look at each individual situation. But I think data can point us in certain directions, right? And make us ask more questions. So I think these are good things. When you look at monthly basis, is summertime where we're going to look. If you look at age group breakdown, which I do have, and I can send to you guys. I just got to confirm, this was 2024 or was this aggregate? Yeah. So we do have a use of force breakdown. I didn't put it in a slide, but by gender, I'm sorry, by gender and by age group. And so when you look, just quickly go over some of this. But if you look at, I'll start with our Black community members. When you look at 2024, there was only one male and one female in 0 to 17 age group. There was 4 males in the 18 to 25 age group. There was 1 female in the 26 to 35 age group. There were 9 males and 3 females in the 36 to 45 age group. And there was 1 male and 1 female in the 46 to 55 age group, and 1 male and 1 female in the 56 to 65 age group. And there was no use of forces on any ethnicity over 65 age group. And I can, if interested, again, I can email this out to you guys. But we have the other ethnicities on here as well. Sure. As long as you can figure out how to talk.
You're not.
We went from a system of IAPRO system of we were not collecting. We are going to do the officer. The officer started with our new system. So we updated our forms, and now every officer involved in this force will be collecting how many years of service they have, just to answer the very question you just had.
And I think just to add before I forget, one of the things that we hope, no promises, because sometimes things take longer than I always expect. But we do have a new software system that does dashboards. And one of my goals has been and will continue to be to create a transparency dashboard where we have a lot of this data available to the public, whether it's monthly or quarterly, or, we'll have to figure it out. But I think as you guys are interested, I think the general public is interested in this data. And so what we want to make sure that we put out even on a dashboard that people can go look at anytime that they want. So that is something that we hope to accomplish this year.
One of the reasons why I asked about the age of the officer is because I was curious that their training standards were different, and the curriculum was different 20 years ago than it was 10 years ago than it was recently, because you're always updating and improving. I know that the older officers then get retrained and brought up to date on the latest, but I was just wondering if there could be some, maybe the efficiency of that most recent training is not working, if say the incidents where older officers were more involved, or if it's the younger officers are more involved. Maybe it's more of a experience or lack of experience and just anxiousness as a new officer. I also the other one I just thought of is when you hire outside officers that have been trained in another program in another community like Livermore or Sacramento or Fresno or something, and they've moved here, you've hired them away, and they don't have the same training that possibly that you've had. I'm just trying to figure out if you can identify using that. You've got a problem. You haven't been taught in the way we've been taught, or
Yeah, there's data that will continue, I don't have it now, but there's data that we're going to continue to look at. As you were talking, one of the things that, we may end up looking at is, because you maybe think of it when you talked about laterals coming to our agency, there's the post standards that every police officer in California has to have, and even the ongoing training. So every agency complies with that. But things like the cultural relations class, right? So after somebody goes through the cultural relations class, does use of forces go up or down, or do officers that have that versus not have that have any more or less use of forces? So I think these are all good suggestions and good ideas. And again, it's just a matter of time and trying to collect the data, which is sometimes, it takes a while to do. But I appreciate those comments, and I think those are all relevant things to consider.
Okay, Andrea, next. Nancy?
Thank you. I appreciate your mentioning that article in today's paper, and I just want to make sure I understand you. So what you see is at least part of the reason for the big surge in traffic stops would be a change in the software or a different use of the software?
Yeah, so we had issues with officers after they made a traffic stop or had any type of RIPA compliant interaction, which is any detention, or they have to get on their phone and they had to enter this RIPA data. And the previous software, which the name of it, Brian, escapes me right now because I can't remember. Veritone is what we either used to use or now use, but nonetheless, it was a different software system. We got it free of charge from the software company. Tried to use it. We had all kinds of issues getting successful submissions into the system. And so we sent a letter to DOJ explaining the low instances of entries and transition to the new system that we now have. So one of the things I've asked is to take a look at, because we have records, which is to me is more accurate, every traffic stop that we make or interaction that we have. And so that is something that we'll look at, because I believe you're going to see a lot more traffic stops than 3,529 in 2022. I don't have the data in front of me. It's something that just came out yesterday. So I've asked our staff to look into the data, but already talking to my records manager, this is the explanation. And I remember sending a letter to DOJ about what it is. So, but again, a headline that Modesto PD triples their traffic stops, is pretty, leads people to conclusions. And sometimes news organizations are more about clicks and readership than it is about solving problems. So, but that is something that we'll take a look at and can come back at a later time, because I'm confident while there probably is an increase because we have more officers, we continue to hire more officers. I continue to want to make sure that we're driving down crime in our city, and traffic behavior and driving is pretty darn horrible in our city. So I expect our traffic unit to make traffic stops. I expect our officers to be out there making traffic stops. And so there's no doubt, I'm sure there is an increase. I don't think it's that increase.
Thank you.
Who's next? Jen?
Right up here. This is good? Okay, all right, good. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. We've had a lot of different conversations about, and I have a whole slew of questions, too many to take up too much time, but what I will do is type them all out for you and send them to you, especially in preparation for the February 18th
That'd be great.
town hall. Because this is not about got you or attacking or anything like that. It really is about how do we correct or how do we solve problems.
Yep.
So I first too want to commend you, because I think that you really, from the bottom of my heart, I really do believe that you have tried to introduce new concepts and things since you've become the police chief. The cultural relations class is really good. It's awesome. Your willingness to have a community police review board, you supported that. I think that's another good thing that shows your sincere attempt to try to rectify some of the things. Just a couple of the questions that I would have that you'll see is, do you keep a tally on particular officers that are involved in use of force incidents related to any race? For example, with Lamatia, he had four,
Officer involved shootings.
right.
Yeah.
So whenever there's a use of force with particular officers, do you keep up
We do.
with that?
Yep.
Okay. So that would be one thing that I think would be interested in reporting. And then too, with these officers that are involved in use of force, do you know how many have been in the military or have been in combat situations before?
We do typically, well, not typically, I can't think of an instance where we don't, because people usually put that on their resume. So I don't know if it's up to date, but we did look as an exercise, not in use of force, but to see how many people we have in the military. We did have a spreadsheet at one point recently, I'd say in the last year, of who was in the military and who wasn't. So I know we can get that data and keep it up to date, but we do know who was in the military and who wasn't.
I think that would be interesting to know. And then too, whenever you get a report, can you outline that process of how it works, that you know there was a use of force incident?
Yes. So anytime an officer uses force, they're required per our policy to report that immediately to a supervisor. And so a supervisor, unless there's some exigent circumstance where they can't, is required to come on scene to talk to the officer and evaluate what's going on. The officer then is required to enter that use of force with all of the suspect data, their own data, into this tracking system, use of force tracking system, with all of the details about it, the case number, the injury to the officer, the injury to the suspect, what type of force was used, all of that type of stuff. The reports get attached, and that goes to a supervisor. The supervisor goes out on scene, photographs are taken of the suspect, witnesses are talked to, the suspect is attempted to be talked to. All of those are captured in police reports. We have the photographs. All of that is forwarded to a sergeant for review. So that sergeant looks at all of that and aligns with our policy on use of force and determines whether that use of force, or makes a recommendation on whether that use of force was within policy. But then also, even if it was within policy, can call out training issues that they thought, hey, maybe they didn't de-escalate the situation enough. They could have, this would have happened. Maybe next time it would have not led to a use of force. They also can call out good behavior, like, hey, you really tried to de-escalate that situation, and it still ended up in a use of force. I mean, we expect both positive and negative comments, if there are any, in those reviews. So they make a suggestion, and that gets sent to their lieutenant. And that lieutenant then reviews that use of force as well, along with the comments from the sergeant, and then determines whether he agrees or disagrees, or he or she disagrees, and any further comments that they have. And then that gets forwarded to that division's commander, so a captain of whatever division, which most of our use of forces come from our operations division, which is our patrol division. And that captain does the same thing. And that captain ultimately makes a final decision on whether that use of force is within policy. Now, when it comes to officer involved shootings, it's a whole different story. That goes to internal affairs. We follow the process. Our internal affairs does the administrative. DA's office does a criminal review of the investigation, and obviously DOJ gets involved if the circumstances meet it. But in general, use of forces minus officer involved shootings, the previous 3 level of review is how most of our use of forces get reviewed.
So are the body cams ever checked?
Always.
Always. Okay, that's good. Okay. Yeah, I'm really interested in just learning more about how this whole process works, to include the training that the officers get, because, the statistics that the Modesto B initially put out had to do with 10 years back.
Right.
Not just this past year. So maybe this past year does show improvement. And I think that when there's effort into it, that things can improve, when we really do try to confront certain issues. And I think under your leadership that things will improve.
Yeah, just to let you know, the last 5 years, again, I wanted to make this digestible, because sometimes you can over data, and then we're all kind of left with our brains reeling. But we did look at the last 5 data, we aggregated in that slide. But when you look at use of force, I'll just give you totals. 2019, actually we did 6 years, 2019, 196 use of forces. 2020, it actually jumped up to 266 uses of force. 2021 was 200 uses of force. 2022 was 232 uses of force. 2023 was 195 uses of force, and 2024 ended with 141 uses of force. So definitely the lowest use of forces that we've had this past year, understanding that it could fluctuate just by a few since in the last 6 years.
Well, I know that there's concern with the new administration and possibly police officers feeling more empowered and emboldened and protected to do whatever they want to do. So it'll be interesting to see how things move forward.
And I
But-
think that's why it's critical more than ever, especially with the fear that people have right now about the incoming administration, like you said. I mean, we just have to look to the immigration issue and the fear that we see going on there, which is why when we can, we feel it's appropriate, we're going to get out in front of issues. And we made a statement on social media the other day because we trust building in our community is key to darn near everything.
I think you're good at getting out in front of issues.
Chief, can I just add one thing just for some context?
Yeah.
For 2024, these numbers may still change, or they are going to change. They're not finalized yet. So I just make sure we're clear on that.
I think I said that.
I just want to make sure.
All right.
I'll make sure it's understood. Sorry.
And one last comment though, because I know that when we look at data, just reading it is data,
Yeah.
but for people who've actually experienced some kind of trauma, and to include myself, I mean, that stays with you for life.
Yep.
And especially if you have kids that see that or, you know, just different things. And so I'm really hoping that Modesto can be the model for changing some of these stats that are not just Modesto, but also nationwide.
Sure. Well, and to that point, even the meeting I had a few Saturdays ago, hearing some of the conversations there, there's no doubt that they were 100% genuine and the impact that they remember the context they have in a negative context. Like you said, people remember those the rest of their life, and then that's often forms their perspective, right? And that's natural for us all. And so it's something that we want to do our best to make sure that we're not traumatizing people and having these interactions that leave people with a negative perception of our police department for the rest of their lives.
Unnecessarily. I mean, sometimes
Sure.
I know use of force is necessary.
Right. Yeah.
But we're talking about unnecessary use of
agreed.
force.
Agreed.
What's next? Nico, I know, I saw him push it. Did you push it?
Yeah.
Just, I think it's Nico's next. Okay.
No. All right, I'll leave it quick. Frank added a lot of data for you guys to capture already. The only thing I was asking is any data behind like the language spoken of the suspect. And like how many were Spanish speakers only, things like that, language barriers, and how we can try to resolve those issues during any uses of force.
Yeah, that might be a tougher one. I'll look at Brian, but I don't, we might be able to figure out how we can reconcile that.
Yeah, I believe that information was captured with our former system, which most of this data comes from. So we probably could find it all. I don't want to confirm that right now without having a chance to check. I think it was
But
collected.
no, good. Well, we can take it. We can see if we have that data.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. I was happy to see the trending down of the numbers. And there's only so much you can do also in the respect with, like Wendy said, there's some people that are just, you have to use the force in order to resolve the issue because of their behavior. So, I mean, that, to be fair, I think that's part of it, but I love what you said about Modesto being the leader in this, in teaching others how to get those numbers down to where we don't have this, these things going on that people have experienced that have caused trauma. I know a guy, an artist friend that from Chicago that had a lot of issues that just because he was a black guy. And I've never had that, but to have that cloud that's over you all the time, it really affects how, how you think and relate.
It's hard being black.
Yeah, no, I know. And somebody told me you don't know what it's like to get up every day and walk out and think about that all day long. And how are people relating to me based on not who I am as a person, but just the color of my skin. And it's a real thing. How do these numbers compare with like-sized police departments?
Well, that is often difficult unless Brian knows more than I do. A lot of the reporting is voluntary when it comes to use of force with the FBI and things like that. And so, I haven't seen, I mean, there's nonprofits and different agencies that put out reports. The FBI does put out reports. But I couldn't tell you specifically agencies related to our size. I can tell you the data that I continue to look around when you poke around, look at other cities, big and small, throughout the United States. The numbers are often very similar. So there's usually disparity when it comes to use of forces or traffic stops, things like that, with minority group populations.
Steve, I see you on there. Do you have any comment?
Yeah,
on
Steve
that?
may have a better, he may have any
The
more information. than-
question was, how do these numbers compare with other agencies?
So I really, it's a very big question, and there are a lot of variables that go into it. So I wouldn't have a simple answer for you, I guess is how I would put it.
Okay. That's fair. It's just another thing to compare, along the way. All right. Any questions from the
Chairman
audience?
Hahn?
What?
Member Bryant.
Ken?
Now, check. Chief, you provided us with 5 years of data here. And then you also mentioned you had some from 2019 as well. And I noticed, not surprising to me anyway, and I don't know whether it would be surprising to you, that the pandemic years there seemed to be a spike in these incidents of use of force. And then it seems that since then it's trended downward. Is that valuable information to you, or is it too early to tell that that's a trend developing? Or is it, I guess, do you use that to, develop your management strategy as far as, training and that sort of thing? I mean, the last 2 years, it seems to be trending downward. That's only a small, capture of information. So you understand what I'm asking? Is it of value to you?
Well, yeah, I think what my initial thought was when you asked that question was, I think I would just be giving a anecdotal answer, and I don't know when I look at years particularly. I more of a look at what happened. I think in 2020 you had George Floyd, and I think there was a lot of distrust growing amongst the nation with police. And so again, I've got nothing to back it up, but I, is the growing distrust and unhappiness, did that lead to more tension and interactions, to more uses of force? Possibly. I'm not saying that. I haven't analyzed the data. I don't know. But 2020 is, in the last 6 years, is when we had our highest use of force. So, so more than COVID, I think it could be, again, just the social perception
The heightened awareness
or the social perception of police.
Yeah.
Because I fully believe that's where it comes back to relationships. If there's a distrust amongst two people when they're communicating, there often can be, bad outcomes. If me and you are buddies and we're talking to each other, or we have, we're on the same playing field, maybe there's less likely, maybe, right? I mean, we all know there's circumstances beyond anybody's control, but I think, I think the more that we can understand what each other, us as the community, perceptions of an African-American getting stopped by the police and what they may feel different to a Caucasian person, I think we need to understand that so that our interactions take those feelings into consideration. Because someone with less trust in the police, it doesn't have to just be, it could be any ethnicity, but people with less trust in the police and fear of the police may act a way that seems suspicious to the officers, and then that interaction goes bad, and now our use of force is being used.
Yeah.
So I think it's, again, it's not one collective department, agency, organization, in my opinion, to solve this issue. I think we all have to play a part in solving this issue.
Thanks.
That it? Okay, does anybody in the audience have any questions, comments regarding the report?
The board, and officers, I had a question about the use of force data. When you guys say it's like non-residents, does that include like the houseless, since they don't actually have like actual like addresses like to actually report to? And then, when these use of force incidents are happening like around the same neighborhoods or specific neighborhoods? There's like, of course, we all know some neighborhoods have a higher like, crime due to like poverty, but that's my question. Is this happening more in the same neighborhoods? Is it happening around schools? And like, what impact does this have like on our youth? Because I know one of the things that we're focusing on in this CPRB is reducing youth arrests for Hispanic youth. So those are like my three questions. For non-residents, does it include the houseless? Because again, they don't have addresses. Is it done in the same neighborhoods? And how does this happen and affect, does this happen around the schools, and how it affects our youth? Okay.
Good, okay. Good questions. I'll answer the second question first. I have not mapped these, so I don't have a map for that to answer that question. As far as the first question goes, non-residents, if a person was unhoused, we included them as a resident of Modesto, because it's impossible to tell. But I think one thing we found with our point in time counts and whatnot is that most of our unhoused population are actually from here, so they are our residents. So we included those among Modesto residents.
Do a lot of these use of force incidents happen around schools and the same neighborhoods?
I think, excuse me, maybe Brian needs to answer that. I think that goes back to the first answer. We haven't mapped where all the use of forces happen, so that's something I'll take a note of to see if, to consider that as well, because obviously mapping where it happens would also give us if it is around schools and such.
Thank you.
And also give you a place to start with some of this stuff, right? If you see it in a particular neighborhood, that would be good. Any other questions, comments?
Good evening, all. Just addressing some of the points that were raised in that presentation. I'm glad that we're taking time to deep dive into the data. And while there is complexity in the issues of policing, I think it's also important to keep in mind that while the data may at times be complex, sometimes the realities of the disparities that we're seeing with disproportionate use of force against our Black residents, the reality, if you're getting victimized in that way, is going to feel very simple. You're going to feel less than, you're going to feel like you're not respected. So I'm glad to know that there are efforts being made to improve community relations. And to that point, I would say that since Modesto Police Department prides itself on being a learning organization, I would bring up, as I've done in this chamber previously, the need to demilitarize our police force. Now, I recognize when I say that, people might find, oh, is that defund the police? No, it is not. These are separate ideas. Because when I'm saying demilitarize, I think the fact that our police force has some of the equipment that it does, has all the drones that we have, all the pepper gel, all the different SWAT types of vehicles. I can't help but feel like that makes the city less safe But again, Modesto Police Department is a learning organization, so don't just take my feelings for it. I've cited this previously in this chamber as well. Nature's Journal of Human Behavior has found that militarization of police forces does not improve safety outcomes for communities. It does not make people feel safer, not even a little bit. So, being as we're so data driven, I would hope that we could take the science at heart and recognize that a militarized police force is not a safer police force. A militarized police department is not a safer police department. Our streets are not at war. I do not see any reason why we need such militarization in our police force. Moreover, while we're on the topic of diving into things on a deeper level, some semantics here, but I think they're important. I noticed the phrase officer-involved shooting was used. And while I recognize that's a common phrase, I think that often divorces the reality. When I think about the history of police violence in Modesto, when I think of Trevor Seaver, I don't think he was the victim of an officer-involved shooting. I think he was the victim of murder. And I think it's fair to name that. Words matter. In this very chamber, just recently, our police chief had said that he found the term "know your rights" to be adversarial. And I don't think it's adversarial for someone to want to know their rights. I think that's a common sense want that any member of the community would want. And in the name of building trust, I would hope that we could maintain things like knowing our rights. Because personally, as a member of the community,
We're off topic.
sustained, fair enough. With that being said, I do feel that it's germane to the issue of community trust. I'll acknowledge that if that's off topic, I'll respect that, but I do disagree with that claim. I think that if we're going to build trust, we have to demilitarize and we have to know our rights. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Hello, everybody. Hi, I also have a couple questions. But before we do that, I understand that one thing that was kind of mentioned on here is how folks engage with police do affect outcomes. And of course, that would always be the case, whether you do or not. We've been told, I've been told by folks to obviously do not have your moment of justice. When you're in these types of situations, but have them in courts and stuff like that. But even that is a fear for the fact that that issue even exists, the fact that those circumstances lead to that. And what ends up happening is I'm glad that we are trying to have more dialogue with minority community members. But what I want to know more of, like, what came out of that dialogue? And if that's what we're going to move for, should we do that more often? Are we going to need that more often due to, yes, there's a lot of trauma and harm regarding this. The disproportionate rates are there. And it's not just something that happens, whether or not the history of policing has just led to it. Any type of disproportionate rate of something is a cause for alarm. It should always be treated that way. Before, we were also told that more cultural relations classes would have less cops out on the streets. But I feel like a lot of us do agree that we should have that, and I feel like a lot of us should have more safer. So I hope you're agreeing that maybe we should continue that even further with more police, because I agree with my comrade who last time said I would rather have more people have that training, police, than actually than a bunch that are there on the streets not without that training. And so I want to make sure that also maybe due to the fact that crime rates in the United States are at an all-time low. And what we normally see here, and also based on the police reports, a lot of the arrests are for low-level nonviolent crimes, be it most of them being traffic stops or others in that arena, and also the quality of life crimes, which is really policing houseless folks, which is much more of a social economic issue. And I think, can we talk more about possibly is what's being used is broken windows policing that is leading to a lot of these incidents and maybe leading to unnecessary use of force incidents. But also, in order for us to feel safe too, I feel like we want much stronger accountability measures. And we've talked about this before, but it's really looking at that arbitration process. We want to make sure that folks that do, police that do engage in dangerous incidents, of use of force incidents, can be held accountable. And that's why we want to push that, so that the chief can ensure that they are not on the police force. And that's what I have to say.
The arbitration is.
Okay.
So
thank
the,
you.
just for clarification, the public comment on the, should be limited to the actual topic.
Okay. Anyone else? You have to,
No, there's one, so you get one chance to speak on the item.
I'm sorry.
This is even more important why we need to get out into the community, because in this type of structured setting, it's just impossible to have dialogue. If you got to just stick to one topic, it can only be 3 minutes. People can't really express and say what they want to say because it's too strict. And so that's why I think we really need to get out into the community a lot more so that we don't have to cut you off at 3 minutes, and that you may hit a really good point at 2 minutes and 59 seconds, and then we got to say, oh, it's 3 minutes, so you can't talk anymore. Or if a topic slides off into another arena, sometimes we just got to follow the flow with what it goes, and we can't do that here. And so I think that's even more reason. Part of the solution, I think, is us coming from behind these seats and getting out in the community so we can really talk.
Yeah, and just for clarification, the initial public comment is open for any topic that's related to the board.
Yeah.
And Chair, if I may, if a member of the public has a question on that wasn't able to be asked, they can give that question to myself, Lieutenant Kleiber, or Assistant Chief, and we'll be happy to answer.
All right.
Still too many rules to control.
Okay. So we're going to close the public comment part of this, and there's no action needed on this. And now we're going to go to C, adoption of calendar topics 2025. Scotty.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. At the last meeting, there was a discussion topic regarding topics for the 2025 presentation calendar for the CPRB. What you have before you this evening is a list of topics that were assigned to the various months from January through June. And then there are additional topics that we have listed at the bottom. And it's staff's recommendation that, that the topics be somewhat flexible throughout the year, and that the board assigns topics maybe over the next 3 to 4 to 5 months. And then maybe as we come back in about 3 months or so, another discussion can be about, okay, what do we set for July, August? Maybe there's another topic that could be fit into June. You might be able to do that along the way. It's important to also note that there is, oftentimes time required for staff to do some research or to come back with information that's requested from the board. So this is helpful to us. If we do that, with a couple months in advance, we'd be able to possibly come back in March, April with your board, and then we can talk about some topics for the next months. The nice part about having, in our opinion, the nice part about having topics at the bottom here is sometimes it's a little bit more timely. It's like we know that we want to talk about these topics at some point in the year, but there might be an incident or there might be something that comes up and says, we'd like to bump that into the queue, or there's which has happened this year. There's maybe a time or two when we've kind of rearranged the topics because there was something that was a little bit more of more interest to the board based on timing. So this is what we've plugged in. It's the use of force study update, which is tonight. Presentation by the judge in February. March has community engagement activities presentation and update on officers at school program. April has the OIR annual report, January 2024 to December 2024. And then May 2025 is MPD response report to OIR annual report. And then June has CPRB's annual report, January
2024 through December 2024. Again, some of these are kind of normal business that we have plugged in here, such as the annual reports, and responses. But there might be additional topics that you want to take from the bottom or add one to the bottom. We could do that at any time. And so, Mr. Chair, I turn it back over to you.
How does that sound to everyone? Do we need to act on approving like the first 3 months of this, or?
Yeah, the staff's recommendation is that there's an action taken to adopt the schedule as presented tonight, and then also with the recommendation that staff will, or that topics will be added later throughout the year.
Okay, so, yes.
Can we get confirmation now, kind of as inclusion of this, that the February meeting will be held somewhere else?
I'm sorry, I should have brought that up. Thank you for the reminder.
You're welcome.
As mentioned at last month's meeting, there was a request for a meeting of the CPRB in an alternate location other than 1010 10th Street. At staff, we've went out and done our due diligence. We have found a location. It is available, and it is in a portion of the community, I believe, which was desirable by the CPRB, and that's the King Kennedy Memorial Center, Southwest Modesto. That is a location that's available, and we have confirmed that, and we have asked them to put a placeholder down for us to have that meeting there at the same time at the third Wednesday of the month in February. And one note is that when we're away from this building, we don't have the exact technology abilities that we do at this facility. That means that Zoom will not be able to be broadcasted from there. However, we will have a video camera there so that we can film the board meeting, and then we would post that following the meeting. Thank you for the reminder.
Okay.
Again?
That would be, I think the date's also
The
on your-
19th. And we'll also be at the King Kennedy Center on the 18th for
Yeah,
the town.
and that was my recollection, is that that was why that location was also desirable.
Mhm.
Okay, so we need to have a motion to,
I have another question. If we want to add something to this or move it up, do we have to wait until we go to the discussion part and do it then, or should we suggest it now?
You can suggest
okay.
it now.
I think that we need to include on the agenda something about the mass deportation and ISIS and ICE. I mean, that's a really community concern.
Okay, actually, I'll ask the police chief to weigh in on that particular topic. I know that that was discussed last month also. Oops, sorry, go ahead.
Only because I'm sure it will defer to us. Beyond like what I said, and I think I attached my our department policy to the CPRB, I guess I would just ask clarification on when and where and what exact information you want. Happy to do it. I just want to get some direction on.
Well, I think people want to kind of know what to expect, and again, what their rights are if they're approached by patrol, the different types of patrols that are out there. There's just a lot of fear going on right now, and I don't see how that could wait until July or August or September, because that's going on
could
right
that be
now.
some, because your presentation on that is pretty short. It's because it's, I heard what what it is. Could we do that at the King Kennedy Center? You're not going to be able to answer for all the other organizations, but that could be very appropriate in my mind for you to say what your policies are and procedures are.
Yeah, I think what my role would be in that is, or suggest my role is providing clarification like I've done, and maybe it's helpful in a different forum. And that's why I sent you guys the email, because I wanted to make sure that for your stakeholder groups that you are part of, you can disseminate that information as well. But I would be happy to, at that meeting, if that's the board feels appropriate, provide kind of clarification like I did, just to reiterate the different roles that the federal government plays versus local law enforcement. That,
I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
Otherwise, every time a police car comes up to anybody, they're gonna be really, really afraid.
sure.
And everybody's at risk when people are fearful.
Right.
And if they feel like, they're getting ready to get arrested or whatever.
Yeah, if you'd like me to reiterate that in a very quick presentation at the King Kennedy Center next month, we're happy to do that.
I think that's very
I
appropriate.
think that would be good.
No, it's just, it'll be part of the motion as discussed, the topics as discussed. And John, you can check me here. Topics as discussed, the motion on that, and then also a motion on approving, conducting the meeting in February at the King Kennedy Memorial Center. If you want to buckle those together, I think that would be fine.
All right, and since we're going to talk about lumping them together, I haven't, I know Austin brought forward the idea of us working together to put together a community presentation, which he called Know Your Rights Summit. I'm thinking more of a community presentation workshop. And it was suggested in our report to the city council that we do this type of thing out in the community. So I was wondering if it makes sense to have that, beginning to talk about that happen in the committee, policy goal committee number 1, which Trish chairs, to improve relations between community and the department. It's already a standing committee, and because I would want Austin to be there because it's his brainchild, and he can be there in addition on that topic without violating the Brown Act, because I'm able to be on any of the committees, so that's why there are only 3. And so by adding 4, it still doesn't violate the Brown Act, but nobody else could attend those. But I just think I don't want to wait to start talking about this stuff, because there's a whole thing about how we're going to get out to the community that this is going to solve, or at least get started the conversation about that. So I would suggest that we add that to it's on the items here, but it's a future topic that we assign that to policy goal 1. Do you have any comments about that?
You're good.
No? Okay. Actually, my committee met, the 3 of us met equally, I'm not the chair of that, we're chairing together.
Oh,
But that
sorry.
committee, we met today actually, and we also recognized a connection between our kind of charge here and this component of it. So I would like to make a suggestion, so to speak, and see if my 2 fellow community or committee partners would agree that we step forward. We will take ownership of getting this off the ground, start with a suggestion to build a subcommittee from that with the key stakeholders that should be at that table for that, and directly including Austin because it's his brainchild, but allowing us to kind of help collaborate the other partners, bring the concept to life. Maybe we would share how we run that element, but I think it would make sense if you guys are on board with that, we could do that. Frank? think?
Anybody have any comments about like that? Okay, good. Because I just felt like we weren't addressing the issue that Austin brought up, and I think he did a great job of. If you look at his thing he gave us, it's pretty broad.
So that went to 2 of you. We have not all necessarily seen it, other than we got a glimpse of it yesterday. But before we commit that, I'd like my 3rd partner here to weigh in.
No, I agree.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right, Brad, you got what you wanted.
all right. Well, not yet.
Well, and John, I just checked with you. I don't think that we really need a motion on that particularly. It's like, that's a
No.
subcommittee
It's,
following up based on the charge that subcommittee actually has. You just discussed it just now.
okay.
Yeah, you just adopt that as an item of your committee.
Semi, can you turn my mic on?
Oh,
On.
I turned all the microphones on. It's just
Okay.
easier.
It's easier.
But-
Free for all.
Yeah, we need to just keep order. That's all.
I'm going to move that we accept the,
Well, wait, I think we need to have public comment on this first. Is that right?
Let's open it up to the
Yes,
public.
open up to public comment before we vote on this.
Okay.
Anybody have any comments? Okay. Yeah, anything related to this,
To the calendar.
to the calendar. If you want to add, suggest adding something on there, you're welcome to do that.
So again, one of the things that we've been talking about when we can be coming to the CPRB meetings is like, how arbitration is allowing for Joseph Lamontia to sue the city and possibly get his job back. So I feel like having that and including that discussion in the calendar topics would be beneficial for us, especially because again, it gives us like holding those people accountable when officers are not, are actually harming our community instead of protecting them. And I feel like there's nothing better that improves those community relationships than actually holding those cops accountable. Another one is definitely policing unhoused folks. And I know that there has been some worries that like, hey, well, how can CPRB really like help out like this issue when there's like a whole separate committee for that? But again, most of us are closer to being unhoused than we ever will be to becoming, wealthy. And these people are the ones who are the most vulnerable, and people will less likely actually stand up for these people. Again, Trevor Seaver had a lot of support, but because of his family. People who are unhoused, they don't have the economic means to kind of like bring in attorneys and fight for their rights or file complaints. And I think that is definitely something we do want to like ensure that like we are advocating for this community, because these people are still our neighbors and these people are still residents of Modesto. I understand the police has I think recently you guys published like how you guys are gonna go with ICE. I don't think you guys are involved with them, but I definitely do want to see like how just reassuring the community what is your role, what to expect, because I know you guys are improving relations, but most of us most of the people here in Modesto aren't actually like citizens. They're not actually legal residents, but they're still residents of Modesto. They contribute to our economy. They are also our neighbors. These are people who work hard, and there is a lot of fear with that. And even though policing and then ICE are different forms of law enforcement, just to reassure the community that they will be safe. And definitely, to add on to that, maybe even push for like sanctuary city resolutions with the city council, because again, I know this is just for our Modesto Police Department, but it's also like us having these constructive conversations is to make sure that all of our residents here in Modesto will actually feel safe and be productive. And yeah, those are a few of the topics that I'm hoping that you guys might consider in these next upcoming organizing. Thank you.
Two of those we're already on. We're going to talk about the ICE at King Kennedy next month. And there's in our parking lot, the policing and homelessness and presentation by the Homeless Alliance are two of those. And as she was speaking, the chat team is under you, correct? And the Rangers is under you. So that make a lot of sense for what we're doing here. So when we get to that, that will be something.
Quick comment.
Just one on the sanctuary city issues like that. We don't have anything to do with that. You need to talk to city council about that. We're about policing only.
And then in regards to the arbitration, if you can possibly reach out to us and let us know like specific things you want to know about, because we did have a presentation about arbitration. And so, what else is it that you want to know about exactly, the details of it, so that we can try to figure out specific topics to talk about in regards to that.
Yeah, do you know what month that was that we talked, that had the It wasn't that long ago.
We don't have that, but if the member of the public would like to leave their contact information,
Yeah.
we'd be more than happy
And then
to
you can,
send them a link to the presentation that was, I believe that might have been in around August,
yeah,
July, August,
something like that.
September.
September. Thank you.
Okay.
Don't forget also that the judge is supposed to speak on February the 19th about his perspective of reducing youth arrest, especially with Latino youth.
Right.
So
All right, we'll close the public comment and come
I
back.
think we had another one.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Okay, there's not another one, right?
There's two more.
Two more. Whoever's
Go ahead,
next, go ahead.
come on up.
Okay, thank you. Just so you know, to give an introduction, we are CV BIPOC, Central Valley Black Indigenous People of Color Coalition. We didn't introduce ourselves. But yes, 100% agree with having a topic about ICE. I think it's a very urgent one. So yes, I do support that. We do. We also, we're going to double down on this, but we do want to have more of a conversation about that arbitration, and we can definitely talk more about it, specifically reviewing the situation with Joseph LaMantia, and really talking about other cities and their decisions regarding arbitration. And that's why we want to keep that, we want to push for that as a topic. We do want to talk about policing on house folks, because in the police report for Modesto, the most recent one was from June 2024. And for statistics, for crime statistics for that, for quality of life, it's 1,092 from June. It's like 1,000 every single month. That's insane. And as we could see is that these folks also get their stuff thrown away because of Grants Pass versus Johnson. Can arrest people, cite people just for having, what do you call it, even if they don't have anywhere to go. So we do want to talk about that, because I think we should put resources elsewhere than just like harassing homeless folks. Hate crimes was a thing, and I think it still is, but we recently had those situations regarding like Southside Modesto and around the Ceres area. We want to talk about that too. We want to continue having that conversation just so folks, specifically folks of color, do feel safe. We also want to talk about chat and really look at what's been going on, statistics regarding chat and ways that we can maybe improve it, so that we can have folks responding to mental illness situations. Again, Trevor Seaver was an example, one that went really wrong, and also Paul Chavez, and unfortunately, his wife had also passed away due to that trauma. Y'all's policy, a goal is to review use of force. I think we should continue that conversation to see, okay, what has come of it, like specifically those conversations with minority groups, like, are we getting stuff out of that? Definitely interested to know about that. We do support talking about reducing youth arrest too. That's something that y'all mentioned, and we 100% align with that too. If we can for sure get that on there more often. And I believe that's what I have here. Thank you.
Next.
Just real quick. Just to respond real quick, I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can't speak specifically about the arbitration case with Joseph LaMantia because it's still ongoing. So that's something that we will not be able to do. I just want to throw that out there for you.
Good evening. Very much echoing the sentiments of my peers, but in order to avoid keeping us all here for longer than we need to be tonight, I'll just say I strongly support those ideas. But I'm also specifically interested in learning more about some of the community outreach programs, because I think we all come in here with very different perspectives. And I'm aware of programs like having like Save Me a Seat or 10K with a Cop up. So just learning more about some of those existing programs and the impact that they have. Like, what can we point to say, hey, this is working, or in what ways? Specifically those regarding our school sites. I'm in education myself, so that's of particular interest to me. I think that would be something that'd be of general interest to the community, just trying to get clarity on what are the programs, what are their impacts, where are we seeing those making sure that we're always applying our efforts in the most efficacious way for our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, bring it back to the board. And we need a motion to accept as discussed the calendar. And always able to change it, but this is just our marching orders for tonight. And then as things occur or something else comes up.
I will make a motion to accept this with the understanding that as needed, we can make changes and that the location in February is at King Kennedy Center and the presentation by the judge could potentially be titled so that it includes more of what Wendy said. It's presentation by judges, not explanatory. That's my motion.
I second the motion.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Now we go to A, which is the election of a chair and vice chair. I'm just reading my cheat notes here. We're gonna open it up now for nominations for the chair and vice chair, but we're gonna take them one at a time because we do it together, then you're on like a ticket type thing. So it's one at a time. And we're gonna take the chair first, and what will happen is we'll call for a motion. And then I have a motion and a second, and then the clerk calls the roll. If you don't get the majority, then we'll do it again until we get the same amount, the majority. So we need motions. Yes.
I move to elect Nico Solario, member Solario as chair.
I second.
Okay, since we're doing the counting, we'll take the roll.
Member Beasley Day?
Here.
Well, I guess you just say aye.
Aye. You want me to say aye?
Yes.
Member Bryant?
Aye.
Member Byrd?
Aye.
Member Christensen?
Aye.
Member Demrell?
Aye.
Member Smith?
Aye.
Vice Chair Solario?
Nay.
Chairman Hahn?
Yes.
All right, I believe that
So,
means
moving on to the chair, after this item, you get to take over and have fun with it. So we have a vice chair nomination.
Is this how we did it last time?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly like this?
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Well, I'm reading it right
I was
here.
just wondering.
And all of our
Alright.
committees, all of our committees get to do this, so.
I'll nominate board member Damrell for vice chair.
Second. So can you call the roll?
yes. Member Beasley Day?
Aye.
Member Bryant?
Aye.
Member Byrd?
Aye.
Member Christensen?
Aye.
Member Demrell?
No.
Member Smith?
Aye.
Chair Solorio?
No.
All right, Chairman Hahn?
Yes.
I think that's
So that motion carries. So we have Nico as the chairman, Frank is the vice chair.
Can I just ask you, should Austin, because he wasn't here, can he not have been nominated or what? Because Austin has his whole program. I don't want to push back too hard. I mean, I'll do it, obviously, but I was thinking Austin has a lot of energy with Know Your Rights and was very, very,
I think he's good with the outcome.
he's good with the outcome?
I think
Okay.
so.
Okay, then I'm good with the outcome.
Okay.
So then we go to the.
Yeah, yes.
Here's the cheat sheet.
Thanks.
Thank you. Maybe we'll ask the attorney, should they rearrange their seats now?
Oh,
here. I just have this. Yeah, I think you can stay there for the rest. Okay. Yeah, okay. Wait, so where are we at? The left
5B,
page?
I think.
Yeah.
No, please.
Oh.
Actually, we did shift, it looks like 5B, we went into the conversation, so
Oh,
that's the attorney on that one for 5A. 5A was alternate CPRB meeting location.
Okay.
And Mr. Attorney, it
okay.
looks
So-
like we've already taken a motion on that, and it was approved.
So we're on to
Yeah,
5B.
5A, we already discussed.
5B now.
Okay. So we're moving on to 5B. And we have a presentation from Independent Police Auditor Update from Stephen Conley.
Good evening again, everybody, and congratulations or consolations to Chair Solorio and Vice Chair Damrell. And thank you very much, former Chair Hahn. I just know how much time went into the job as far as your perspective on it. And your leadership in the first year and a half of the organization is very much appreciated. So thank you. I'm happy to be with you tonight remotely. I'm even more enthusiastic about being with you in person again next month. And I'm looking forward to getting together with Commissioner Byrd offline, or excuse me, Board Member Byrd offline at some point in the next couple of weeks so that we can do some planning. I'm planning to be in Modesto for both of the events on February 18th and February 19th at the King Kennedy Center, and happy to play as much or little a role in either of those as the board thinks would be appropriate. Just a couple of more things with regard to my current activities and just to follow up on some of the things I heard earlier today. I appreciated the chief's presentation on use of force and some of the statistical data. One of the things that he mentioned was just to talk and it was prompted by a question from Board Member Byrd, just in terms of the department's force review process and the different steps that they go through. And part of our scope of work in the Independent Police Auditor's Office and part of our responsibility as far as our audit project is concerned is to be looking at a sampling of those uses of force kind of qualitatively as opposed to quantitatively, less about the statistics than in terms of assessing the strengths and maybe limitations of the board's, or excuse me, of the department's review process. All of these events are significant in their own way in terms of the exercise of police power. And so the thoroughness with which the department looks at this stuff and not, obviously tries to answer the policy question of whether the officer's actions were consistent with the policy and training. But going beyond that to say, hey, are there any other insights we can get from this, any other aspects of this encounter that are deserving of additional managerial attention? That is absolutely one of the things that we advocate with all the different agencies that we work with. And we focused on it quite a bit in our first report last year. And we are underway now, thanks to the department providing us. We took a random sampling of last year's force events. We have about 40 different incidents that we're going to be taking a look at with regard to the body-worn camera, the police reports, and some of the underlying information, but then also looking at what the department's response was, how the department evaluated those, and what their findings and any recommendations would be. So hopefully that will continue to contribute to this conversation. And then just very briefly, there was another mention of the RIPA statistics and the RIPA data and some of the difficulties that agencies have had wrapping their arms around that and trying to figure out how that data can be most instructive. One of the things that hopefully is some added value from our office, my colleagues and myself with OIR Group, is that we do this kind of work in a lot of different jurisdictions. And so we have some bases of comparison at times. And I just wanted to let you know, I was in touch with a representative from Palo Alto earlier this week. That is an agency that we have worked closely with in terms of auditing and review of their processes for a number of years now. And they actually engaged in one of the academic studies that has been discussed here as a potential option and a way to go forward. They decided to hire an academic group from the Midwest to do a full-blown statistical analysis, data analysis. And as the chief was saying earlier, and has mentioned it in this body before, that it's a big investment. They invested a lot of money, and it has taken them well over a year to get to where they're at right now. But my understanding is that within the next couple of months, they're going to be sharing their findings and recommendations with the city and obviously the police department itself. So I'm really looking forward to that in terms of any insights it can give us. I mean, these are professional academics who really are doing the quantitative analysis and trying to find some useful meaning and some takeaways from the statistics that can be kind of overwhelming. So I will certainly be watching that as it happens in the next couple of months, and we'll be happy to report back to you if there are any insights that might be relevant to Modesto trying to get a better handle on this information as well. So that's all I have for tonight, but of course, happy to answer any questions and looking forward to seeing everybody next month.
Thank you, Stephen. Are there any questions from the board?
Yeah,
for Stephen?
Nico, I have one.
Okay.
Stephen, when you engage with the folks in Palo Alto, once they have the report in their hands and have time to analyze it and determine whether or not, I guess the term I would use is if it was of value to them, if they thought they got a return on their investment. As you mentioned, you know, it's a substantial amount of money to have one of these analysis done and a study done. And so, you know, obviously, if that were the direction that we recommended here, obviously the city council would have to approve that and budget for it and that sort of thing. But I would be interested to know from their perspective if they thought they received value on their investment.
Absolutely. I appreciate the question. And yeah, believe me, the city council will be asking that same question with a great deal of interest. And I know the department has worked closely with them along the way in terms of providing data for them and answering the questions that have come up. And I think the department is very amenable to any insights that might help address some of the disparities or provide insights into how things could be done differently or better. So yeah, very much looking forward to that. And I appreciate your question, and we'll focus on that whole value added component to it.
Thank you.
I'd be very interested too in seeing the outcome of that Palo Alto. But I think that for the city of Modesto, for us to spend $100,000 or whatever on a study to tell us stuff that we already know, I think I'd rather see a roller skating rink being built for kids than to take a year to study something. You know, yeah. So if we have money, I think we need to invest it in youth. They love skating. Skating is good.
Are there any other questions from the board? All righty. Is there any questions from the public for Stephen? All right, seeing none. One last time, any further comments from the board? All right, moving on to board comments and reports. Policy goal number 8, review use of force policy to minimize likelihood of death resulting from use of force. Are there any announcements or reports?
We don't have anything to report.
Thank you. Policy goal number 1, improve relations between the community and the department.
I actually think each of us have something to share. Mine's super short. I have accepted an invitation to go through the next cohort of the cultural relations program with Mr. Baldwin. And he asked if I was able to help encourage a few other community members, outside community members, to join in. So I cast a net to several, and I have 4 or 5 joining me. A couple are coming from my board, one from Modesto Junior College, one is in talent acquisition for staffing, and the new CEO of the Boys and Girls Club, which leans into youth. So I have a couple others that are likely. So looking forward to having the experience.
I'll enjoy it.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay, I had just an observation. I missed the meeting last December 9th. And so I had to go online to find the video of the meeting. I'm just going to say that I showed I showed how to get there real quickly through Google, but I did not Google. I went to the City of Modesto website, and it's kind of a layered to find our board, and then to find the video. I found the minutes. The minutes are readily available all the way back to 2023. But the video is only the single video of December meeting. I found it. It's just not that obvious. But when I hear like members of the community tonight say they'd like to see or know more about the arbitration, non-binding versus binding arbitration, and then we did discuss that at length one night. There's no video. There might be minutes, which are probably truncated, but there's no video. And I don't know if that's going to be something. So two things: easier access on the website and more obvious access. And then secondly, because it is community engagement, but the other thing is the video archives.
So I can answer that. When you go to the CPRB main page, I know you're talking about the link off to the side. So what I usually do is I post the most current video there, but all of the videos from prior meetings, they are available where the agendas live. So when you go to the agenda center, there's the agenda link, and then there's a media. So anytime there's a video link, there'll be a little camera there that shows that there's a media link.
Okay.
The only reason you might not be seeing anything from prior years is now that we're in 2025, you're probably seeing Jan 2025. If you hover up, I don't remember the exact look of it, but you can change the year and you should see all the videos. And if it's missing, I'll double check tomorrow, but they should all be up there.
Is it me now? Yeah. Overall, I think for us, to improve relations is to, one, have a website that's user-friendly, but also, there has to be a way to connect us as a board to the community so that they know. Do they even know to go there, that there's a civilian police review board? How are we getting the word out there? So that we can get into relationship with our community and understand what they are feeling about our Modesto Police Department and how we can be more effective to them. That's going to be more transparent.
Thank you. And lastly, policy goal number 3, reduce youth arrest, particularly among Latino youth.
We don't have anything to report tonight, but the presentation on February the 19th with the Judge Ruben Villalobos, who works at Juvenile Hall on a daily basis with troubled teens. He will be the guest presenter, and we'll learn more then. That'll be our report.
Thank you. Moving on to future agenda items. There are none at the moment.
I do have one other thing to bring. We did, Trish and I, that committee and I came up with some ideas for the branding and the marketing to go to what Letitia was talking about with us trying to establish who we are and what we do and a relationship with the community. We're requesting for a 10 by 10 tent with a custom tent that has community police review board on each side of the top of it. We're requesting a table and a custom tablecloth. We're requesting polo shirts, a badge, and pamphlets that we can pass out. And then we also want the police department to know that whenever we're out, we can also be a vehicle to get information out that the police department wants to put out to the community.
Scotty, on that, did you want to go into detail about what we kind of spoke about?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, staff is in receipt of your email that you had sent earlier today. And we'll probably need to get a little bit more information, but we'll be reaching back out to you and your subcommittee so that we can iron out the details. I've talked to the city manager about that, and we just need to understand fully the request. So we'll be in touch with you. Thank you.
Alrighty, and moving on from number 7 here is the meeting is adjourned. So thank you guys. The next meeting is February 19th at the King Kennedy Center at 5:30.